and burn.
Hey everybody! So tonight I am just making hopefully another quick video discussing the possibility that Rustin Parr from the Blair Witch, or the Blair Witch mythos, the Blair Witch lore, the guy that was apparently responsible for killing the 7 kids from Burkittsville back in the 40s. There's a real chance that he didn't do it. Now this is what we're led to believe if you've had the opportunity to read The Confession of Rustin Parr, which was written by the same guy that did the Blair Witch dossier. In that, Parr at the end says he didn't do it, and it is suggested that it was the second kid that went missing, a kid by the name of Kyle Brody. There was a girl that went missing first, and then Kyle. And then there were overall there were 8 kids, but Kyle was the only one who survived, which in and of itself is kind of sketchy because he was the second kid taken. And as everybody knows, Parr killed the kids in 2. He brought them both down to the basement. He made one stand in the corner, obviously, and then he slit the other one's throat, grabbed the kid out of the corner, and killed them. So I don't understand how the second kid of 8 would survive. Usually, if anything, it would be one of the later kids who managed to get away. But if a kid got away that early on, you'd figure he would run and find some adults and say, some dude abducted me, he's up in the hills, go and find him. But Kyle doesn't. We're led to believe that Kyle is murdered by Rustin Parr, and yet he isn't. He comes out of the woods unscathed, and he's the one that provides the testimony, the expert witness testimony that hangs Parr. Now, what's interesting about that is Kyle Brody had a history of harming small animals. Again, this is in The Confession of Rustin Parr, written by D.A. Stern. At one point, Parr found him hurting animals. And one of Kyle's friends ended up ratting him out because he showed him his collection of severed mouse heads that he had hammered to a plaque of wood somewhere in an old underground railroad tunnel that he used to hang out in. So Kyle Brody had a history of finding fun in harming small animals, which of course, as anybody knows, it's not a good sign. And then the priest, Dominic Casale, the one that heard Parr's confession, he kind of becomes friends with Parr long before this happens, or ways before this happens. And he decides to go up and visit Parr again, but he finds that Parr has abandoned his house. And Parr's house was very nice. Parr, at one point, as a matter of fact, Dominic Casale, points out how Parr should have been a carpenter. That's apparently how good of a job he was doing on keeping his house up. So anyways, Casale goes up there to visit Parr, and Parr's gone, and the house is overgrown with weeds. And Parr later says that he hasn't lived there in months because it looked like when Parr went in at this one point, it looked like somebody else had sort of taken it over, and Parr didn't like the way that felt, so he left, and he was just kind of living off the land out in the woods. So there's that too, that Parr wasn't even living in his house at the time of the murders. Even though he confessed everything, there is the possibility that the Blair Witch was guiding his hand and sort of forcing the confession. So that could be why he said, "I'm finally finished," because he was possessed by the Blair Witch at that point. But it is really suggested that Parr didn't kill those kids. He even says it right before he's executed. He tells Dominic Casale, the priest that heard his confession, he said, "It wasn't me." And he alludes to it being Kyle Brody, given his history of violence. But then at the same time, you could argue back that just Parr's convenient way out of this, because Parr knew Kyle prior to the murders. And he knew that the kid was troubled. And he knew that the kid was growing up in a tricky household because his father was somewhat abusive. So there's a real possibility that Parr did do it. But then what I like about this is after reading The Confession of Rustin Parr, there is the possibility that Parr didn't do anything at all. So what do you guys think? Do you think Rustin Parr is guilty? Do you think Rustin Parr is innocent? I was always led to believe he's guilty, but then after I read the book, The Confession of Rustin Parr, now I'm not so sure. And what about this Kyle Brody kid, eh? And if you care enough, there's a documentary on YouTube called The Burkittsville 7 about this. And in that, I think can't remember his Carrasco, I think is his last name. I think his first name's like Mike Carrasco. Well, anyways, in that documentary, The Burkittsville 7, he says that he doesn't believe Rustin Parr did it either. He believes it was Kyle Brody. So for anybody who's interested, check out The Burkittsville 7. It's on YouTube, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting out of here. You guys are amazing. Have a great night.